We'll get started with our progressive news headlines. All right. Ready? I got a lot for you. I think everyone is on the same page with the fact that this year the counting is going to be delayed and it's going to take a while. And I was heartened to see that like the whole country didn't explode in a white nationalist nuttiness. At least not yet. It's only Thursday, but the weekend's coming up. But people are just kind of waiting. And, these administrative folks are doing the counting, even though he's basically out there saying, I claim this state for Trump. Well, you can't actually do that. Trump is actually coming up against democracy. I don't think he knows how to be anything other than an autocrat. And perhaps we should keep that in mind when we're voting for people. I don't know. I'm sure half of us did. Also, what I was hearing a lot of yesterday was just the shock and dismay that even though we had record voter turnout, and I think we need to focus on that record voter turnout, and that Biden, I believe, is already ahead of Trump in the popular vote by several million. I don't want to get the numbers right and wrong at this moment because they change constantly, that people were shocked that as many people would come out and vote for Trump. They've dragged themselves out of the swamp. Here's my thoughts. Okay. Here's my thoughts. Anyone who could vote for Trump now, like the first time we're like, okay, they're low information voters. They are low. They have been, Tom Hartman put it so nicely on his program yesterday. They've been co-opted by right-wing media. They've been drowned in right-wing media, which they are watching. There's nothing in them that's like, this doesn't seem quite right. Although the right-wing media people are excellent propagandizers where they give you that nugget of truth and then they build a whole false narrative around it. Anyway, this time anyone who voted for Trump is a low compassion voter. It's impossible to be it any other way. He's putting kids in cages. He's ripping kids away from their parents. We know exactly what he's doing, letting people die as an electoral strategy, potentially, so that he could get, he was trying to play the TV ratings, right? Democrats who believe in the pandemic, because it's real, are voting by mail. They're not all going to be there on time. He tried to shut the post office down. And Republicans who are like, it's just a common cold, will be in the voting booth on November 3rd. Then it would look like he was winning. But at the same time, it didn't even look like he was winning, not even that night, although the mainstream media wanted to keep your eyeballs on the screen. And so they kept making it exciting by possibly Trump winning, possibly again. So that's the situation in which we find ourselves here in the United States. The media situation, the emotional situation, knowing that these low compassion voters still came out en masse and voted for Trump, even though, he kills people, meaning pandemic, and he allows kids to be locked in cages. And then everyone puts up, but Biden built the cages. Okay. Yeah. Fine. I don't even know the history of that story. I don't even know the history of that misinformation. All I know is that Trump used the cages. End of story for me. Anyway, we got more to talk about. I'm excited that the country is calmly letting the counting happen. Even Scott Walker from Wisconsin basically said, I'm not really think we're going to do a recount here. Trump is doing what he always does, suing everyone. But I think, here's my prediction. He's going to win Nevada. He may even win Pennsylvania. And by that time, he might even actually win Georgia. And he's just going to give up his big lawsuits because he knows he's lost. And as a psychologist, I do want to say that it strikes me that this guy is going to go kicking and screaming into the night. Of course, not just because he's a narcissist, but the man has been told by his sociopathic father and his rejecting mother that he was a loser and cast out since he was a child. And so, he's been fighting against that his whole life, calling other people losers, black people, white people, people in military service. They're all losers. He had a show where his whole thing was, you're fired, you loser, get out. and now basically he's losing the election. So we're basically seeing his internal psychological struggle. I much prefer the internal psychological struggle of Biden, who had just a lot of grief to overcome in his life. So he might understand what it is to have loss. Anyway, moving on. That was just my morning screed. Phil, I hope you enjoyed it. Phil is producing the show today. He's nodding his head. You're going to have to take my word on that. Okay, here are the progressive news headlines for Thursday, November the 5th. You're watching Act TV. I'm Julianna Forlano. Emergency rallies were held in cities and towns across the nation yesterday, with Americans taking to the streets to demand that the election officials continue to count every vote and to protect the results of the 2020 presidential election. The rallies, marches, and other socially distanced events are being organized by we're back. Hey, wrong one. There we go. See, Phil, this is why I need you. Oh boy. Those rallies were being they're socially distanced marches and rallies organized by Protect the Results, a broad coalition of 165 grassroots groups, as the counting of mail-in votes in the presidential contest between Trump and former Vice President and future President Joe Biden continues. The coalition said in a statement, right now, election officials are continuing to count millions of votes across the country. Biden is ahead in the Electoral College and the popular vote. And come on now. Let's call it a day. Count them up. Count every vote. Get this guy out of there. Okay. Anyway, the outcome of this election will be decided by the voters, not by decree of Donald Trump. That was the quote there. Okay. This is kind of exciting here. I think I gave you a little taste of what was coming up, but check it. Critics of the nation's failed so-called war on drugs are celebrating a number of victories as Oregon, my old home state, that's true, became the first state in the United States to decriminalize personal drug possession, and voters in 5 states backed the legislation of marijuana. The legalization of marijuana. Measure 110, starting February 1st, will decriminalize the possession of small amounts of drugs, including heroin, cocaine, meth, oxycodone, to have a party, or Percocet. The penalty for possession will be a $100 fine, which may be avoidable if a person agrees to take part in a health assessment, putting drug possession on par with a traffic violation in Oregon. I don't know how this is going to go. There might be more traffic violations if more people have drug possession. We'll see. The Drug Policy Alliance, which authored Measure 110 in Oregon and spent $4 million in support of its passage, said the election results are like taking a sledgehammer to the cornerstone of the drug war. Has anyone said this yet? This is interesting that this happened in Oregon, because the drug war is, responsible for putting a lot of people in jail and criminalizing things that could also be considered a disease, especially Black people, who are prosecuted at higher rates than white people for misdemeanor minor drug violations. Is it weird that Oregon is the first state to decriminalize personal drug possession, and Oregon is like the whitest state in the country? Is that weird? Sure, they're liberal, but I used to live there. The cities are liberal. The outside part are libertarian, so I guess that makes sense, because the liberals want to do something to stop the drug war, and the libertarians are like, stay off my land, people. Let me do what I want. I don't know. Interesting. Regardless of which angle you attack this problem, some good will be coming out of it, which is less people prosecuted, meaning less people of color prosecuted for these minor offenses. All right, moving on. Colorado voters have backed the National Popular Vote Compact, a nationwide effort that could and would effectively neutralize the Electoral College, bye-bye, and ensure that the presidential candidate who receives the most votes in the nation as a whole becomes president. The issue was on the ballot as Proposition 113, which passed, according to the Associated Press and the New York Times. The compact does not take effect until enough states to add up to 270 electoral votes have joined it, including Colorado. A group of 15 states plus DC, totaling 196 electoral votes, are parties to the compact. This is amazing. Get your state on board. I wish I had a list of states for you. I don't have a list of states for you. Alana, if you're listening, could you get me the list of states? And you can text it to me and I will read them so that you know if you don't live there to call your representatives and say, I'm done with this electoral college, especially if you've had either wins or losses in your state. We've had a ton of great wins, which I'd like to read you some of maybe at the end. Yeah, we've had some losses too, but let's not overlook the wins. Puerto Ricans have again voted in favor of making their island home a U.S. state, and they are hoping that, there we go, this time around, they're hoping that their decision will carry actual weight. Puerto Rico, which has been a U.S. territory for 122 years and is the world's oldest colony, has held 5 previous non-binding referendums on the issue, but Congress never took further action to admit Puerto Rico into the Union. Hello. This year, they were asked, should Puerto Rico be immediately admitted into the Union as a state? A majority of voters answered yes, as of yesterday, though Puerto Ricans are American citizens and pay into federal programs like Social Security and Medicare. They do not hold seats in Congress and cannot cast votes for president. You got to be kidding me. I mean, I knew this, but just saying it out loud is absolutely ridiculous. American citizens pay into Social Security and Medicare, don't get taken care of when a hurricane destroys them. I'm speechless. I thought we were all agreement. No taxation without representation. I thought we were. What about DC? All right, let's get this going. That would be a way to cinch the vote for a long time. I hope everyone in DC also lives somewhere else so they can go vote somewhere else. All right. Finally, Nevada voters have approved question 6 on their ballot, which amends the state constitution to mandate that Nevada's electricity providers shift to at least 50% renewable energy, not by 2050, not by 2040, not by the year 3000, but by 2030, which is 10 years from now. I can actually see that future, which is pretty great. The initiative is less about voters changing where their electricity comes from than putting an exclamation point on the decision they've already made. Nevadans passed the exact same initiative in 2018. It just so happens to amend the state constitutions, voters must pass an initiative twice. The "are you sure" part. Anyway, that's what landed the issue back on the ballot this year. It passed again this year. So hooray, Nevada. And we look forward to hearing your Nevada, you're pushing Donald Trump over the edge out the door by electing Joe Biden. This is the Progressive News Report on ACT.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. If you're watching us on YouTube, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Send me a photo of your dog. No, subscribe, share, and stay with us.